Good morning and welcome back to the League Winners Fantasy Show. I am your host, as always, Dalton Salings, and today we will be diving into my top 12 running backs. But first, I do want to address the news that has come out yesterday, and that is that Malik Nabers is not expected to end up on the PUP. So, Giants wide receiver Malik Nabers, it was expected he was going to go on the physically unable to perform list, opening camp there, and then potentially opening the season there, missing the first 4 weeks at least. The Giants placed three players on the pup yesterday. Malik Nabers was not one of them, which is a very positive sign for him. Talked about it at length in the NFC East video, excuse me. Kind of my worries with Nabers. I am still worried about him, and I'll get more into where I have him in our wide receiver episode coming on Monday. But for right now, it is important to note that he is trending towards being available week one, which is remarkable. I have adjusted my rankings to have him playing all 17 games. I do think he will be a little limited, especially at the start of the season, but this is a remarkable development, one I did not see coming. It's a great thing for him, though, and I look forward to potentially seeing him on the field week one. But without further ado, let's do what we came here to do and talk about the running backs. The top two running backs, I'm going to kind of talk one and two together here, kind of bunch them up. It's up to you. These are the top two picks in the draft in fantasy. It doesn't really matter which order you take them, in my opinion. They're both great players. They both do good things and have the potential to be the number one overall player. I've kind of risen on my number two guy, but it's Jameer Gibbs and Bijan Robinson. Not to bury the lead there, but those are the two guys. I have them one and two. I have Gibbs one, Robinson two, but I think it's close. And I cannot fault anyone for going one over the other. I'm slightly higher on Gibbs because of the passing upside, in my opinion. I think he has, well, excuse me, no, because of the rushing upside. I have Robinson. I did adjust it to give Robinson a few more receptions with the looks of Tua starting at quarterback in Atlanta. So I have him slightly behind, but I have Gibbs with more rushing yards and more rushing touchdowns. I do think that the Lions are a better offense in general. Will have the lead more in games, are a better team. I think because of that, we'll see a little bit more groundwork out of Jameer Gibbs. I have him really taking just a couple extra touches on the ground than Bijan Robinson, but doing more with them. I have him about 5 yards a pop compared to just 4.9 yards a carry out of Bijan. So that's the biggest difference between those two. Once again, this is a coin toss in my head. I like Gibbs slightly. I take Gibbs at the one, but if I get the second overall pick and leave with Bijan Robinson, I am more than happy with that as well. It's really just, once again, up to you. Which player do you think is going to be the one? For me, it's Gibbs, but I don't believe there's a wrong answer here. If both stay healthy, I don't see a world where they don't finish one and two. Once again, we get to the third guy, and this is where I differentiate from ADP a bit. I have Devon Achane as my number three running back. He's being drafted as the eighth running back off the board on Sleeper. I have him as my number three running back. It's so hard for me to put him any lower than this, and I know that is near his ceiling. The RB3 is likely his ceiling. I'm projecting him around his ceiling, but for me, it's just he has performed so well, is the number one force in what isn't going to be a very good offense. I expect him to get a ton of work. I think he could lead running backs in receptions. I have him with 86 receptions. I mean, it's a wide receiver number. Even if the line isn't great and he doesn't get a lot on the ground, I just don't see how he isn't heavily involved in this passing game. That there isn't going to be design stuff for Achane to get the ball, and that he's not going to be the leading touchdown scorer on this team. All that put together makes it just, like I said, very difficult for me to look at anyone else other than Achane as the top guy in Miami. And for me, that's enough to put him as my RB3. Once again, similar like I talked about last episode with the quarterbacks with Dak Prescott. I'm not drafting him in every single draft. I'm not drafting him at wide receiver at RB3. I think this is his upside. I think he could get injured. He's a smaller back. He's injury prone. It's a new offense. Mike McDaniel's out the door. We saw him perform well. There is risk here, but just in my head, I think the most likely path is his ceiling if he stays healthy, and that is the RB3. He is one of my most drafted players because I am very high on him this year. I like to try and put my money where my mouth is, and that's what I've been doing this year in best ball. But Adrian is a worry and is a bit of a scary player if you're worried about injuries. But for me, I think the upside is just too great. RB4, I have the RB3. It's Christian McCaffrey. I think there's a similar upside path with the receiving work, and there's a similar risk of injuries. I like Adrian just a little bit more because his offense is a little bit worse. I think he gets a little bit more of the work, but McCaffrey, if he can stay healthy, is going to see a lot of touches and is going to get work in the passing game. Once again, it's coming down to injuries. It's a guy that's been injured a ton in his career. We've seen it. He'll have a season where he's healthy and a season where he's injured. Huge touches season for him last year, which does make me a little bit nervous for this season, but I'm not going to project an injury for Christian McCaffrey. I'm going to lean on the fact that he's going to be healthy, and if so, I think he performs right around his ADP. RB3 off the board. I have him at RB4, and I have him just ahead of the guy going as the RB4, who I have as the RB5 in Jonathan Taylor. I think it's a very different path for Jonathan Taylor. I think he could lead the league in rushing yards. I actually do have him projected to lead the league in rushing yards, and that's where he's going to get his work. He is a viable receiver, but isn't going to put up the receiving numbers that we see from the guys ahead of him. That's what kind of is his limiting factor here. But he's a great runner of the football. He's in performed very well last year, early in the year when Daniel Jones was healthy. We're expecting Daniel Jones back. I like Jonathan Taylor. If you want to go, it's weird to say Jonathan Taylor's a safer health play, but I think he is slightly safer health wise than Christian McCaffrey is. I don't blame you for taking McCaffrey over Taylor or Taylor over McCaffrey. I do have it about zero point 0.8 points per game separating them, but like I said, I do enjoy Christian McCaffrey a little bit more. Jonathan Taylor, in my opinion, a little bit safer. So do with that as you wish. My RB6 is the RB10 off the board. It's Saquon Barkley. Talked about in the NFC East episode, I think the Eagles' offense does lean on the ground a little bit more with the departure of A.J. Brown. I think that does come a lot from Saquon Barkley. That's why I also like Tank Bigsby a little bit more than consensus this year. But I like Barkley a lot. I expect him to be leaned on as the number one back and him get a workload of touches and a ton of carries and a ton of work, and also a little bit more in the receiving game because A.J. Brown is out the door. The extra receptions that can come because of that departure, Jalen Hurts needing to check down a little bit more, them not having a designed give to someone or another could go a long way, and I expect Saquon Barkley to be a big beneficiary of that. He's being drafted as the RB10 on Sleeper. He's going much earlier than that on most other formats, so it seems like that's kind of the spot where you can take advantage of a sliding ADP in Saquon Barkley. I think, like I said, you got to know your site. You got to know the ADPs. If you can take advantage of that of Barkley sliding because his ADP is lower, I would take that on Sleeper every day of the week. I don't have too much of him on Underdog because his ADP is higher, but on Sleeper, I think that's a great value. My wide receiver, my RB7 is the RB13 off the board. It's Derrick Henry. A lot of older guys here for me, and once again, it is the injury risk with Derrick Henry, and he doesn't offer a ton of receiving upside, but I expect this Ravens offense to still produce and have a strong running game. I'd like Derrick Henry to be the force of that. I mean, that's not a hot take at all, Derrick Henry leading a running game, but I think Henry has another strong season. I think he sees a lot of touches. I have him for 280 carries this year, which is a ton. I think he takes all those touches. I don't think he has a 350 touch season or anything like that, but I think he could see 300 on the upside. He's going to score touchdowns. He's going to be a threat. Until he runs out of gas, I'm not going to bet against the King. He's going as the RB13 off the board in sleeper drafts right now, which is a little crazy to me. I think that's way too late for him. Once again, there's guys below him that we'll talk about here in just a minute that I would prefer him to. I would take him over. I mean, I take him behind Barkley, of course. I like him being drafted there, but we're going to get to a couple names here in a second that I would prefer Henry to. Once again, it's the injury risk with the age. Does he slow down a little bit? But I'd play that game every day of the week on betting on a guy that's proven that he can keep going as he gets older. And now I have the RB5 off the board, my RB8. That's going to be James Cook. My thing with James Cook, I talked about in the AFC East video, it's touchdown regression. I don't think he scores as many touchdowns. I think he comes back down to earth in that regard, and because of that, you're going to have a little bit worse production. I think Josh Allen throws a few more and runs for a few more. I have Josh Allen as the number one fantasy player. I think James Cook kind of suffers because of that. I think people are drafting him off of his last year production, which is fair. But for me, I don't think he reproduces that same touchdown number. I don't think he gets necessarily the same amount of receiving work. So I am a little bit lower on James Cook than consensus. Not out on him. I have him as my RB8, but I'm not going to be drafting much of him as the RB5. I'd rather have, the Christian McCaffrey going before him, and there's some guys going right behind him that I would prefer as well. So for me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to draft James Cook there when I could punt it around and grab a Barkley or a Henry, or go earlier and get a McCaffrey or a Taylor. So Cook's kind of in a weird spot for me that I just won't be drafting very much of him this year. My RB9 is being drafted as the RB12. That's Chase Brown. I love this Bengals offense. I'll talk about him yesterday. I talk about him today, and I'll talk about him again on Monday with the receivers. But I like this Bengals offense. I think you want to have shares of it. I'm in on Chase. I mean, there's not too much to say about him. I think he's going to have receiving work. He's going to be a threat out of the backfield. He's the number 3 receiver on this offense, in my opinion. I think the ground game does slow down. I have him below 1,000 yards. He's actually my only top 12 running back I have below 1,000 yards, but I think he gets enough receiving work to offset it. I just don't have him being uber efficient. I have him around 4.3 a carry, which isn't anything crazy. And so I think without that efficiency, he's not going to eclipse 1,000 yards. I think his ceiling could be a top 4 running back if he increases that efficiency. If he goes for 1,200 yards this year, he's a top 4 running back. But I just don't see him doing that this season. But I still think he's a great pick as the RB12. I don't mind taking him over Derrick Henry. I think he's a little bit health-wise a little bit safer. So if you're saying, between Henry and Chase Brown, you have Henry ranked higher, Yeah, but Chase Brown is a little bit safer health-wise, so I don't mind that in the slightest. He's a guy I'm trying to get more exposure of as we get closer to the season. Don't have a lot right now, but I do like Chase Brown a lot. Right behind him, I have Josh Jacobs as my RB10. He's the RB14 off the board right now, and that comes from the off the field stuff. He was going in the top 10 RBs, I believe, before that happened. Off the field stuff happened. Now there's questions of will he even be available to play? Will there be legal action? We've seen the NFL take legal action down the road, kind of kick that can a little bit. So I expect more of the same of that. I don't expect him to have any sort of decision made this season. I think he'll be able to play all season and not have a problem with that. So I have him as my RB10. I have him just behind Chase Brown and just ahead of the next guy we'll talk about. I like him his touchdown upside. I have him for 12 touchdowns on just over 10,000 yards, or goodness gracious, just over 1,000 yards. But I have him for 12 touchdowns, and that's really the separator for Josh Jacobs this season. RB11 for me is Ashton Genty. He goes off the board at RB7. I think people are still buying into the college hype. I think he's a great player. I don't know that this Raiders offense is taking the step forward that's needed for Ashton Genty to take a leap. I think he takes a jump. I don't think he takes a leap. I like him in the RB11. If he's sliding, I take him, but a lot of people are very excited about his upside because, yes, if this offense does step forward, you can argue Genty's a top five talent wise running back. Getting a top five talent guy at RB7 feels like a steal. I just don't really see the path. I do project him closer to his floor with 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns. I think that is about his floor this year, maybe a little bit lower than that on each of the numbers, but I don't see him finishing outside the top 12 running backs unless of an injury. So that is the kind of upside there is, oh, well, he should be a safer play, but I just, in my head, I can't take a running back that early as my one that I don't see a path to being a realistic path to being a top five running back. I just don't have that path in my head with this Raiders offense. That's not an anti-Genty take as much as it's an anti-Raiders offense take. I'll take Genty if he's sliding, but at the RB7, it's just unlikely I'm going to pay that price. And our last running back in my top 12 is Omarion Hampton. He goes as the RB9. Now, I like Hampton a lot. There is worries about how good was he really before he went down with an injury last year. Was it more of just exciting rookie hype? I don't think it matters. Mike McDaniel's coming in. I think Hampton's going to thrive in that system. I think he's a top 12 running back. I have him, like I said, a little bit below his ADP. I do think that's the hype of, oh, look at what he did last year in his limited sample size, those exciting production. I think that's warranted. I don't mind reaching for him a little bit because I do think he has a very high ceiling. I think he has that top five ceiling I was talking about with Mike McDaniels as the offensive coordinator. It's going to be a run first offense, and it should be a good offense in general. So I don't mind reaching a little bit for Omari and Hampton. I'm not doing it too much, but I would not fault you for doing it the slightest. I have him as a top 12 running back. Kind of more middle ground for him. Not really projected his ceiling or floor. I think his floor is much lower than this with the injury risk, but his ceiling is much higher as well. So if you want that upside shot, Omari and Hampton is your guy. Our last two, so the two guys that are ranked inside the top 12, but I don't have inside my top 12, are going to be, well, let's talk about first the RB6 off the board right now on Sleeper, which is crazy to me. I have him as the RB16, Kenneth Walker. Now, I want to sit in this for a second because Ken Walker with the Kansas City Chiefs now, it's a better situation. There's less competition for carries. I get all of that. I have him for over 10,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. I just don't know how much of the receiving work he's going to get. I don't know what his true upside is in this offense. I mean, I talked about the Chiefs being more fairly priced this year. Ken Walker is the exception to that. It pains me to pay such a high price for somebody who I don't see him outperforming RB6. I don't think the Chiefs are going to produce a top five running back, and I'm not going to draft a guy at 6 who I think that's his ceiling. Now I'm predicting him near his floor in my opinion at RB16, but I think that's a more likely. I think it's more likely he hits his floor than his ceiling this year. I am not in on Ken Walker in the slightest. The other guy going in the top 12 is the RB11 Jeremiah Love. I have him at 13, so I have him just outside my top 12. He's the rookie. He looked great. Camp started yesterday. We have the footage coming out. Oh man, look at Jeremiah Love. Look at the cuts and stuff. He looks phenomenal. I think his ADP will rise a little bit even. I don't mind it. I think he's got upside. Similar to Ashton Genty, I don't trust the offense very much, which does limit me a bit without a ton of receiving work. I do have Love for 52 targets, so 39 catches, which is a strong number, but not a Devontae Chan level of receptions or a Bijan Robinson level of receptions. And without that, or without being an incredible rusher of the football in terms of straight power, like Jonathan Taylor, I just can't rank them much higher. So the ceiling is high for Love, but I think the floor is very low this year in his rookie season. I'm not opposed to drafting him at his RB11 cost, but once again, I mean, if I could go Saquon Barkley, Chase Brown, or Jeremiah Love, I'm going to take both Barkley and Brown over Jeremiah Love this year. That's going to limit my exposure a little bit. That concludes the running backs right here. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. Very glad we were able to get through this. Monday and Tuesday will be the wide receiver and tight end episodes to wrap up our positional breakdowns. I'm very excited about that. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.